Hello, and welcome to this month's installment of the M86 Security Thought Leadership Series. My name is Robert Ricola. I'll be your host today. With me and presenting on today's topic is Chris Marlowe. Chris is a Senior Product Manager for the M86 Secure Web Gateway. He's a 20-year veteran of the security industry and an expert in instructing organizations on how to enable the safe and productive use of Web 2.0 technologies. Before we start, I wanted to inform you today's presentation is being recorded. You will get an email specifically and personally from me in about 24 to 48 hours, and that email will include a link to the recording of this presentation, as well as our new report, Lowering IT Costs, How to Reduce the Need for Desktop Remediation. Additionally, as part of today's presentation, we'll also host a Q&A session at the end. I encourage you to ask questions early and often. We have about 15 minutes set up for that, and it often will fill up. So please do ask your questions throughout. You can do so by using the question and answer panel in your GoToWebinar interface. So with that, I give you Chris Marlowe. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Robert. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about lowering IT costs and how to reduce the need for PC remediation. So here's the agenda we're going to go through. The correlation between malware and PC remediation. How pervasive is this problem? Malware infection. What are the symptoms, and can they have an underlying larger problem? Also, the debilitating effects of infected systems and how they affect business, and understanding what the root cause of that is, how next-generation attacks are successful, understanding the malware protection gap, desktop cleanup, hunger good enough, and finally, what works, some case studies and some recommendations by us. So the correlation between desktop remediation and malware. Every year, organizations spend significant time, resources, and money to remediate damaged desktop systems, and the problem is only increasing as the malware problem grows. The cost associated with reimaging, remediating desktops often exceeds the established IT budgets, which in turn reduces funds or resources available for strategic or core IT projects. So ultimately, this can impact an organization's bottom line. The specific causes of these problems are not always obvious, though. However, more often than not, malware, especially next-generation threats, is the culprit, and is damaging systems, stealing valuable information, and leaving PCs inoperable without IT support intervention. Though the exact cost of PC remediation is varied by organization, one thing is become very clear. An average malware attack today can cause significant damage, which forces organizations to expend higher percentages of their resources and budgets, more than they have anticipated. How big is this problem? Malware problem is not a new challenge, but the severity is escalating. Not only for executives and other business managers who worry about corporate reputation, compliance, data loss, and other corporate level concerns, but also for technical support and IT teams who are forced to stretch their resources and budgets to repair and sometimes even replace the increasing number of damaged malware-infected systems. Underscoring this is the industry research by M86 and other sources, and they consistently report of high numbers of infected PCs in organizations. For example, Gartner estimates that 4 to 8% of an organization's PCs are infected with a bot at any given. Microsoft reports that 5% of computers, 1 out of every 20, are infected. And with not just one, but an average of 3 to 5 malware applications each. A research study conducted by Osterman Research and M86 Security shows that 70% of organizations surveyed have been infected by web-based malware in the past 12 months. So how much do these malware infections cost? How much is the remediation? One security vendor reported the average cost of resolving or remediating individual malware incidents at $334 per case, while a joint Osterman Edgeware McAfee report puts a conservative estimate between $150 to $200 per each desktop incident. So in reality, these attacks probably cost organizations substantially more over the long term than is reported because they amass measurable hard costs as well as less quantifiable soft costs and lost opportunities. For example, Network World published that almost 40% of enterprise IT trouble tickets are from spyware alone, which means these engineers are being paid to deal with malware-inflicted damage while most strategic projects go unaddressed. In personal research I do the market research for M86 security. I've seen these costs for desktop remediation, specifically ones that are remote in nature. They are up to $1,200 per incident. This is direct information from customers of ours. Conservative estimates at best. So there's a sign of a bigger problem here. Most people are familiar with the more publicized consequences of malware-infected systems. These include compromised confidential customer information, mishandling of personal identifiable information, stolen funds, the theft of intellectual property, etc., etc., etc. However, ineffective security also leads to additional costs that are often overlooked, such as crippled productivity, lost revenue, escalating IT operation budgets, all of which can be staggering. An infected machine requires an IT staff investment for remediation, as well as the user's time to reinstall programs, restore the computer to its former state. A survey of 820 IT decision makers in SMB organizations in the US, UK, and Australia indicate that reimaging infected machines alone averages more than 17 hours per month. And in companies where at least 25% of the employees access a server remotely, repair time takes even longer, thus the added costs. So, like I said, everything we've mentioned here is conservative. Soft costs often encompass personal as well as company brand, image, and reputation damage, and loss of trusted relationships with customers and partners. So it's a huge deal. It's difficult to be comfortable doing business with a company or an agency that can't protect proprietary or confidential information. Opportunity costs also take a toll. The IT person remediating the system could have otherwise spent that time proactively improving enterprise security defenses rather than reactively responding to a malware infection. All the while, the user whose machine was infected could have been doing his normal job and functions uninterrupted. So the soft costs can go on and on and on. We're just throwing out a few of the variables that will be affecting. So let's start understanding what the root cause of some of this stuff is. Since 2007, the cybercrime industry has grown more than 400%, with tens of thousands of malware variants discovered every single day. Gartner acknowledges the change in the threat environment that has attributed to this huge increase in malware incidents. M86 refers to this change as next-generation threats, sophisticated, targeted, socially well-engineered attacks designed to avoid traditional security measures and steal sensitive data for financial or competitive gain. Examples of these are listed here: phishing and blended threat emails, advanced persistent threats, targeted attacks, zero-day attacks, advanced polymorphic malware attacks. These next-generation attacks are specifically designed to bypass almost every existing web security solution, to infect a system, remain there undetected for a period of time, and then to collect something valuable to the criminal, such as sensitive information or access to finances. And these cyber criminals continuously refine these attacks to achieve even higher levels of success, greater profitability, and lower detection rates. So they don't want to be found anymore. Right? Back in the day, I'll date myself, there was a time when if you took someone down, it was, yay, I took someone down. I was actually in an office at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the CEO of our company clicked on the Anacornicova virus. So, it happens. It was a little more malicious, not malicious, but irritating, funny. I got this many people infected. It was more of a bragging right in those days. Now it's about financial gain. It is a true business. So let's start understanding these next generation threats and what we call the malware gap. This is our terminology. So most web security vendors offer solutions that detect less than 50% of next generation threats before they enter an organization's network, leaving a malware gap, look at the virtual quotes with my fingers, on networks and PCs. Okay? So a Cyvalence cyber intelligence report found that Traditional antivirus products cannot adequately protect against new and quickly changing malware threats on the Internet. An analysis measured the average daily detection rate of 14 of the most widely used antivirus products against real-time confirmed attacks for 6 months. They found that less than half of the malware threats were detected. Additional testing found that the leading 6 antivirus products demonstrated approximately 50% chance of protection, even a week after the release of new malware threats. In supporting this further, M86 Security found a similar result in its own testing, noting that as much as 60% of malware, specifically targeted next-generation threats with new malicious code, evades most of their web security solutions. Why is this happening? Well, it's because technology is commonly used to detect malicious attacks, such as antivirus, web filtering, firewalls, IDS, IPS, and even most secure web gateways rely on matching what is scanned on a web page to a list of identified or previously encountered threats to a pattern of misbehavior to recognize malware and then protect against it. This is a problem because most every type of next-generation threat uses unknown, zero-day malware that will not be on a signature list or match a pattern. So the issue is here is the people that are creating the malware don't have a board to report CEO or profit and loss statements. They can do whatever they want. So they can be creative as they want and innovative as they want to try to infiltrate our systems to get access to them. So let's talk about desktop cleanup and it being more than just a nuisance. So we're going to look at a couple of case studies on a 100,000 employee organization and a 300,000 employee organization. In case one, an employee financial institution needed to constantly re-image desktop PCs because of action malware. The IT team estimated a steady workload of approximately 40 PCs a day, or 12,000 infected PCs per year. This is a crippling demand, considering this was time spent on desktop re-imaging alone. That's it. Once the team calculated the time and the money spent re-imaging the PCs, they realized they were looking at over $3 million annual figure for remediation only. By comparison, Gartner's estimate, remember we said just a few minutes ago that their estimates were conservative. Here's case in point. Gartner's estimate that 4 to 8% of enterprise PCs would be infected would have put this number at 8,000 instead of 12, which is considerably less. So, moving on to case scenario number 2, this 300,000 user company, also in the financial industry, experienced help desk costs of $10 million per year because of malware-infected PCs. This organization outsources technical support services to a third party who charged per call. At $10 million per year and climbing, the IT budget was being monopolized by these routine support tasks. This was a huge problem, especially for a financial organization that relies on its budget for strategic and competitive purposes such as implementing innovative technologies for online mobile banking, et cetera, securing its customers' data. And this organization estimated 133 infected PCs per day. That's almost 40,000 infections per year. Compared to Gartner's 4 to 8% again, as an estimate, that would have put it at 12 to 24,000 instead of the 39,900, which it actually was. So as I mentioned before, I want to just hammer this point home. Gartner's estimates in this area are extremely conservative and are not painting the picture of what we're seeing in the market. The market is much worse than the picture they're painting. So neither of these financial institutions that were operating are protected. They both had some kind of security industries. Honestly, they both had the security industry's largest vendor solutions, fully deployed and running on the network and desktop levels. Yet they still ended up with millions of dollars in malware cleanup costs. These are real-world examples of the malware gap mentioned previously in this discussion. And because the detection rates have fallen to less than 50% with most of the security solutions, these enterprises are falling victim to malware. And this equates to millions of dollars in remediation costs per year. So I wanted to give you these real-world examples so you know this is just not numbers we're throwing around or an analyst talking to analysts or whatever. So I think we've already started touching on this. Good enough is no longer good enough, right? So the web security solutions are inadequate to protect from today's next generation threats. It's important to understand both the strengths and weaknesses of the primary security techniques used by most of these vendors. Eric Olson, who is Cyvalence's Vice President of Solution Assurance, says that antivirus and firewall systems, while necessary, are insufficient defenses because they're reactive. Malware writers own antivirus software too and know how to counter it. They can test existing antivirus and firewall technologies. They can run malware samples against them and then make necessary tweaks, adjustments to ensure that their attack is going to be successful. Add to this the other side of things, that this is an attack for hire. You can go out and buy the software, have it built for you, and have it tweaked by malware professionals to make sure your malware gets to where you want it to go. So this is a huge business of itself. So another approach used by some vendors is more effective at identifying advanced malware. However, it identifies these threats by catching them once they've attempted to phone home from an organization's network back to the criminal command and control servers. So the downside of this method really is that the malware essentially has to infect your network in order to be identified, and the detection rates are extremely high. They are. We can see that. But an organization's desktop remediation costs will be exorbitant, especially compared to an effective inline solution that stops malware before it gets in. So let me just say here, it's critical that you have a desktop remediation tool because you got to get the stuff out. But once that stuff's out, hopefully that becomes a less of an issue if you have a correct web security solution that keeps stuff from getting in. And it's crucial for IT teams and organizations to understand the consequences of relying on security solutions that fail to fully protect their systems. If the most popular technologies on the market only detect half of today's malware before it enters an organization's network, then organizations are highly vulnerable to the costs and damage inflicted by these attacks. Okay, it's not all bleak. As stated earlier, the internet is the primary attack vector for malware. 92% of all malware attacks are still coming from the web. By instantly analyzing web code as it's visited by users, and by determining the intent of any remaining content that is not already identified as known malware or vulnerability, the M86 Secure Web Gateway detects all forms of malware, including next-generation threats. The differences between the M86 security solutions and other vendors, even the largest vendors in the industry, is that the M86 Secure Web Gateway is the only solution that can determine the intent of the code on a web page, what the code is trying to do to potential victims' computers. Are the actions safe, legitimate? Is the software legitimate? Is the code trying to perform suspicious action? Copy files, open settings, or exploit known vulnerabilities. By focusing on the intent or behavior of the code, the M86 Security's our real-time layered approach, which was outlined here, effectively protects you against the most sophisticated attacks. It's accurate. It is the most accurate in the industry. It's intelligent. We don't need signatures. We don't need patterns. We don't need to look up to the internet to match things. We do this as it happens. So moving left to right, you'll notice that we have traditional technologies in our system. We have URL filtering. We have signature-based AV. It's important to have because that gets the low-hanging fruit. We want to get the known stuff and get it addressed as quickly as possible and get it out of the way so we can focus on those next-generation attacks. When we move into the purple section here, what we're doing is we're looking at vulnerabilities. Known vulnerability. The patches for them are not published quite as quickly. So what we do is we watch and monitor the vulnerability. They could have 10 billion different ways of getting through systems and accessing vulnerabilities, but if we're monitoring the vulnerability, who cares what technique they're using? We're going to block it. We also do file content inspection. We can inspect the content of the files. What are they trying to do? Is it malicious? Is it not? Not only that, since most of the stuff is coming from the internet, as you all know, if you've read anything in the news in the last 6 months or so, you don't have to click on anything. It can happen within a web page, within a web frame. Web pages can be talking to each other, and you can still get infected with a bot or something like that. So the static and dynamic code analysis does exactly that. We can see, we don't guess, we can see exactly what the intent of this code is on the web page before it ever gets inside. And this happens, if you're thinking in your brain, well, it must take a long time to do that. It doesn't. 20 milliseconds, which is a blink of an eye. Your users will never know it's there, which is the beauty. Keep them productive, keep them happy, keep them protected. Page correlation I've already alluded to, as well as dynamic web repair. What if one piece of code, maybe it's an ad on a news site, has gone bad, has become infected. We can strip the bad code out and still serve the page up, so your end users will still be able to work. No one in the industry can do this except us. And if you notice the points below, real-time, empath, granular, signatureless, these are Gartner requirements of what it's going to take to stop next-generation attacks. We're the only people who do this. We're the only company that provides our customers and our partners with these types of solutions. So the proof. Let's go back to our case studies. So remember the 100,000 user financial institution that spent $2 million annually to remediate malware? They ran a side-by-side comparison of 3 web security vendor solutions: a web security appliance, a proxy AV, along with the M86 Secure Web Gateway. In the test, the organization used 2,500 URLs that had been recently identified as containing malicious content. After the 2,500 URLs were run through each solution, the first vendor's web security appliance identified 2. The second vendor's proxy AV found 5 occurrences of malware. M86 Secure Web Gateway recognized 106 malicious URLs. You may be sitting there going, well, Chris, they ran 2,500 known bad URLs. How come you guys only caught 106? Well, the nature of malware these days is they infect a page, and most of the pages that are infected, 85%, are legitimate websites. The code is there for, it could be there for me and not there for any of you, and gone in 30 minutes. So the reality is, out of the 2,500 that were ran through it, only 106 are still infected. Out of that 106, we caught all of them. Now let's go on a little bit more before I get off on a tangent here. These results were analyzed for overblocking and underblocking. The outcome of the analysis was extremely interesting. It turns out that both catches from the first vendor and 4 of the 5 catches from the second were all false positives. They were relying on old information. Okay? All of 106 of the M86 Security's flagged URLs were accurately identified as malicious sites. Although this outcome is to be expected when a reactive list-based technology such as that used by the 2 competitive vendors is compared to real-time, intelligent security like we have, the vendors of the low-performing solutions asked for a second side-by-side. They said, let's do a do-over. This time, they went to 10,000 URLs that were selected from the 100,000 user organization's production environment. This represented a snapshot of general browsing activity within the organization. These were not necessarily URLs that recently had been infected or identified as carrying malware. And the results of the second test came back with no blocks by either of the 2 competitive solutions, but with 2 blocks by M86 Security. And you may think in your head, well, Chris, 2 ain't nothing. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper. Another analysis revealed that the M86 blocks were accurate, while the other vendors had both missed these malicious URLs. And initially, as I mentioned, this may sound insignificant. However, these 10,000 URLs represented about 1 second of time in internet traffic at this organization. Multiply 2 malware cases in 1 second by a full day's worth of internet traffic, and you can quickly see how serious and expensive the problem can be. In this case, the company would have saved more than $3 million a year a significant ROI by just having our product in line. Okay, so I painted a pretty bleak picture, and then I showed you how to address it. So, recommendations. You know, many organizations and their IT decision makers are driven by time and budget constraints nowadays. They are selecting web security solutions in a very, very hurried way without first testing and researching several solutions for, verifying and validating their claims. Almost every vendor claims to have a be-all, end-all web security solution. Everybody has quote-unquote real-time protection. Okay? It's not true. It's a complete spin. We're the only ones doing this kind of stuff. They can't truly prevent today's evasive targeted malware attacks. Instead of relying on testing and relying on old-fashioned bake-offs, right? They're looking at papers and reading the marketing spin and the spiel. No offense to the marketing folks on the call, but instead of doing testing, they're reading documents and making decisions and hoping it's right. And in this environment, you can't do that. This kind of intelligent security prevents even next-generation malware from infiltrating your systems. Isn't it worth a look? So, in conclusion, these web-based attacks, especially those using next-generation threats, have exploded in frequency, and more importantly, they're extremely successful. That's why they're doing it. That's why they're exploding. It's big business. Not all web security solutions are equal, as we've noticed, hopefully. Though many purport to provide superior protection, by taking the time up front to fully investigate and test potential solutions before purchasing and implementing them, organizations can be empowered to make informed, cost-effective decisions about their IT security investments. By selecting an intelligent solution that is truly effective, organizations can prevent malware infections proactively and therefore significantly reduce the quantity and frequency of PC remediation, including reimaging of desktops and the lost time for their IT staff, for the end users, and as we noticed, for those people that are remote, it gets even worse. Additionally, users will be able to maintain productivity. Their IT teams can spend their valuable time on strategic duties, increase efficiencies, and provide significant long-term cost savings. That's the end of my part of the presentation. I sincerely hope that this was beneficial for you. I want to thank you for your kind listening, and we'll open the floor to questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Chris, for your presentation, and appreciate it. We do have a few questions here, but before we get to those, I do want to let our audience know today that we are constantly updating our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube accounts with new information regarding security threats, new industry reports, product updates, and the like, special promotions. So I encourage you, if you're on any of those networks and you'd like more timely information from M86 Security, please go ahead and use those addresses that you see on your screen and start following us. We'd love to have a conversation with you. The first question, Chris, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I really liked it, and it was, can you provide a specific real-world example of an organization that was recently exploited by a next-generation threat? And I think what they're really asking is who the organization is, the next-generation threat, and exactly what happened.
You know what? That's exactly why we did those case studies. The nature of our business is security, and we cannot really divulge who our customers are and the attacks they experience, because, as we noticed during the presentation, this is a reputation thing. And we want to provide you with real-world stuff, which is why we did this presentation. But by giving you customer names, I don't think they'd appreciate that, and I don't think I would be responsible if I left that information out. So I got to respectfully decline to give any kind of customer names, but those are real-world examples I gave you.
Okay. Do you know about anyone that's not an M86 customer? I mean, I know I can think of
Well,
one.
yeah, they're all over the place. They run from government to technology to financial institutions to insurance companies. I know Sony. Let's see, the DoD. It goes on and on and on. And unless you have something that's going to stop the stuff that is occurring new every single day, multiple times a day, thousands of times a day, you're going to be in the same boat. And I really despise FUD because it reminds me of insurance companies. No offense to insurance companies, but you know how it is. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's how they sell. In the security industry, it's very similar, and they're both for good reasons. They want you to think about the health and well-being and security of, in the insurance side, your family, your car, your home, whatever. On our side, we want to protect your data. We want to protect your users. We don't want your reputation to be damaged. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Sony was definitely one that stood out to me, and I believe it was their gaming network that was exploited, and obviously there's hundreds of thousands of users play online games on a pretty regular basis. So there was a lot of data and information that was exploited there.
Exactly.
Yeah. We'll move on to the next question. It says, why do you think there's such a large gap in remediation costs between remote versus local employees?
That's a great question. Well, for one thing, if you're on premise, the IT staff is there and able to help you, and there are tools they can use for the remote people to help. But when you got to completely blow away a system because it's been affected with malware, sometimes those people, and me being a remote employee, you got to shift your system back. You got to pack it up, you got to send it away, and you got to try to make do for the several days. You figure day shipping each way, and I'm local. I'm in California, so if I'd ship it to my Irvine office from Northern California, I could certainly do that and probably have it back within 3 days. But if your headquarters is in New York and you're working in Singapore, you may be down for a week or 10 days. So it's not acceptable. It's a huge cost sink. And like I said, one of the I'll share this with you. A government agency that I visited said the remediation locally inside their building was $1,200 per incident. It goes way up when you talk about remote employees. So, like I said, everything we presented to you today has been extremely conservative.
Okay, great. And the last question I have right now, and just a reminder to everyone, if you have any other questions, please use your control panel. But I do have one question left here, and that is, the case studies represented pretty large companies. I'm a much smaller organization. Do I need to be as concerned, or is this pretty much, for the big boys?
Well, it's for everybody. If it was cost effective to do so, it would make sense for even individuals who from their home to be protected from this type of attack, because nothing's safe. If you have a accounts payable and accounts receivable, which every home does, it's called a checking account, and especially if you have teenagers, I raise my hand, you got to protect these folks, and that can translate directly to a small organization, because it's like a small family. You have your employees who you care deeply about, and you have your accounts and your intellectual property, and whether you're selling technology or you're a brick-and-mortar company or you're a grocery store, they can still get access to your accounts. And, it doesn't happen. They're not going to necessarily steal $10,000 out of your account immediately. What happens is they bleed you slowly. It's very draconian. It may be $5 here, $3 there, and over time, unless you're paying attention to your ledgers, these things go unnoticed. And that is the seduction of the malware creators, because they try to go unnoticed. They get a bot in your network. Okay, that could power a larger network of bots out there to do all kinds of bad things. If they have a Trojan inside or something along those natures, or a rootkit, they're able to take little pieces from you, a little bit at a time, and something that would really go unnoticed unless you're watching your bottom line all the time. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, it's important for the small customer just as much as it is for the large organization.
Great. And I did have another question that came through the question panel here. It says, is this a solution? And I'm gonna guess they're saying the MA6 Secure Gateway, but is this a solution that sits behind a firewall, and how is the solution updated?
Okay, so that's a great question. We have several different flavors of the Secure Web Gateway. It is inline, which means it's a proxy. You could put it in your DMZ. Absolutely, that's where I would suggest it. You can also have a cloud. So you have a control aspect of it. You have a control panel, policy server is what we call it. You also have scanners. A scanner can be, if you're a small organization, the scanner, the policy server can be the same box inside the DMZ, for example, or behind a firewall. We can also have a private cloud. So you can have it so your people running around with their laptops are protected by the same policies while they're going from campus to campus on your site, whether they're inside of a building connected or physically or not. We also have a hybrid solution with a cloud presence that allows you to protect people that are located globally. So that's a many-faceted answer to your question. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible. Additional to this, we have a VMware solution as well. So if you have a VMware environment, we can certainly easily be deployed in that environment as well.
Great. Well, Chris, that's all the questions that I have for today. Thank you so much for your time. For those that are online, I just wanted to remind you that, again, this was recorded, and you should receive an email from myself, Robert Vacola, within the next 48 hours. We'll have links to the recording if you want to refer to this presentation again. And we'll also have a link to our new special report, Lowering IT Costs, How to Reduce the Need for Desktop Remediation. Our next webinar will take place on December 6th, and it will be a presentation of our threat predictions for 2012 presented by Bradley Ansis, our VP of Technical Strategy. Thanks again for joining, and we hope to see you on next month.